We will not dance to their drum. Admiral Mara Kepler watched the blockade as if it were weather, not war. The palisade gate was a ring of tarnished steel and numb blue beacons, its throat packed with a refugee convoy held at gunpoint by the Kandar hirate. Coolant hissed through the bridge conduits, and the deck thrummed like a patient heart. The ultimatum bloomed on every public channel in stark court-white glyphs, Ultimatum 09-59-58. They had given the miners of Far Vale 10 hours to submit to tariff oath and inspection, or be interdicted impounded, and made an example across the net. We teach by showing the cost of force. Argent Mara said, eyes on the vector stacks. Paint me their intent, not their weapons, their logic. The fleet mind's voice arrived with the practiced calm of a measured tide. Doctrine reads as standard Kandar ultimatum protocol. They prefer clocks to casualties. A narrow corridor left open to signal mercy, mined at both margins to harvest panic. If one freighter runs, the doctrine justifies escalation. The air smelled faintly of ozone and machine oil as the Resolute's radar lattice flexed. Commander Reyes folded his arms, leaning into the vibration. They want someone to flinch, he said. They need a pretext. They need a performance, Mara said. We'll give them one that doesn't pay. Reflect their threat without returning their fire. Signals, she added, and Ensign Lynn straightened against a console glow that colored her cheek with cold light. Mirror their timer into our own channels, public, open, and lawful. Cut to every civilian bridge. They deserve to see the clock we see. Lynn's fingers moved, and the ship hummed in approval. The countdown superimposed itself against a wider field of data freighter fuel budgets, expected heat loads, known trajectories through the lane. Mara inhaled the metallic tang of the air and felt the deck rattle under a power shuffle as Auxiliary 4 engaged. Outside, Far Vale's sun lobbed pale gold across the hulls as if time could be warmed by color. Oh. The convoy is asking if we intend to ram the corridor, Reyes said, or if we intend to plead. We don't plead, Mara replied. We show. Argent proposal set. The lattice is ready, the AI said. But there is a human cost to confusion. If we displace their target solutions with decoys, we must be certain none of ours stray. Then we make certain, Mara said. And we warn every captain what's coming. The account will be settled where every eye can see. Before the first set piece, the word had to travel through the people who would live with the result. The crew mess hummed with low voices, and ceramic clatter lights dialed cool to keep tempers steady. Yeoman Tal drummed fingernails on a cup as a warden from the hospital ship recited the plan without jargon. A young engineer listened with a wrench balanced across his gnaw, eyes tracking a diagram of the mirror decoys like fireflies. A cook asked if the public channel would stay open and was told yes, every word would be recorded for inquiry. A medic tied her hair back and said she hated clocks more than bullets because clocks made you argue with yourself. An older spacer rolled her shoulders and said she'd take a bruise over a gravestone if the Admiral could buy it. In the corner, a child hugged a flight jacket 2 sizes too big while her mother signed consent for protective transfer. Someone misted the air with citrus cleaner, and the sharpness of it cut through the fear long enough to breathe. Hear me, Mara said on General. Her voice reached them through a soft crackle, the kind you felt in your teeth. We're going to flood the corridors with images that look like ships but aren't. We'll drag their aim off every honest hull. When the timer hits 9 hours, you'll feel a shiver through the frame as we push heat into the decoys. Let it pass. Stay in your lanes. Keep your crews strapped and your mouths open enough to breathe. We will not fire first. We will not break because they asked us to. Hold your station and your humanity. Argent rendered the mirror lattice with a tactician's restraint. It was not glass nor magic, but a widening cloud of thin film reflectors and transponders seated by smart grapples from the fleet's flanks. Each plate held a programmable skin that stole and resang sensor signatures, scattering radar pings and thermal glows into a haze of ghost ships. The corridor, once a bright line between mines, became a soft-edged river where images drifted and doubled. Reyes rubbed his thumb and forefinger as if feeling grit. "They'll compensate," he said. "They always do," "They will," Argent said. "But compensation costs time. And they priced this ultimatum in hours, not empathy." Mara adjusted the collar of her jacket and tasted recycled air. The hull thrummed under her boots as the decoy coils took their feed. "How's the fuel math?" Lean said Lieutenant Orlov from Tactical. "But survivable. We bleed 10% into the ghosts and 5% into the jammers. We can't do this forever." "We don't need forever," Mara said. "We need long enough for a better story to be told than theirs. Open the net and let every voice in." Ultimatum 09-12-33. The timer bit down another swallow of time as the first Kandar cutters shifted lanes, their beaks canted toward the safe corridor. They probed with short, spiteful pulses that sounded in the Resolute's skin like sharp taps on a window. Each tap rippled through the decoys and came back wider, duller, poorer. The blockade's target solutions smeared like chalk in rain. "Broadcast from Convoy Sierra 3, Lynn said. Her voice trembled barely. Patch, Mara said. A miner's voice arrived, sandpapered by dust and long shifts. "Admiral, we see a lot of us out there. Are we supposed to believe you can make a ghost get shot without anyone bleeding?" "You're supposed to believe we will step between a doctrine and your children," Mara said. She touched the rail and felt its cold. "We will carry the cost any machine cannot. Keep your speed. Keep faith in your crews. Keep the camera on. Leave them nothing to twist." Argent spread the fleet logistics ships held close to the convoy. Escorts drifted wider, slow, and obvious as bait. The big guns angled away like polite men showing empty hands. The smell of warmed plastic rose as consoles bore the load of the deception. Across the blockade line, the Kandar symbols recompiled into a new message, a stern paragraph with a ritual spine. "Compliance earns passage. Defiance earns interdiction." Ultimatum 847-19. "They shortened it," Reyes said. "Thought we wouldn't notice." "They wanted more panic faster," Mara said. "They'll get neither." Lynn touched another key and half the stars flickered as the fleet's open channel cut through static. Civilians could tag what they saw and heard. Auditors could stack it against doctrine. Anyone who wanted to argue after would find a book already opened. Ionization sizzled far off the bow, like a storm rehearsing its anger. Admiral Argent said, tone altered only by precision. "One freighter accelerating out of lane. He's spiking hot. He's frightened." Mara turned toward Orlov. "Can we grab him before he makes their case?" "If we spill thrust, we light ourselves," Orlov said. "We can't break our shape without telling them where the hearts are," Mara said, tasting aluminum and regret. "Open to the captain." A young voice cracked the bridge. "I can't watch a clock, Admiral. I can't let them." "You're not letting this anything," Mara said. "You're living through this, and it's harder than shooting. Ease your hand. Feel your seat. Tell me 5 things you can touch." "My belt," the captain said. "My chair. My wristband. The deck. The ridge under this console where my nail always catches." "Good," Mara said. "Breathe. You'll be out of their ritual when we show them a bill they haven't priced. Some lessons arrive as an invoice." Ultimatum Soit 1201. The Kandar cutters, blindfolded by ghosts, advanced toward the corridor, with intent dressed as charity. Their public language dripped rectitude, escorting, shepherding, guiding. Their private lanes grew tight as fists. Argent flicked a switch inside the lattice, and the ghost signatures condensed just enough to look like a single tempting run. 2 cutters lunged, collision avoidance alarms chirping. "They're about to foul themselves," Orlov said, the words dry as a desert cracker. "Hold," Mara said, her tongue thick with recycled humidity. "Let them choose. The first cutter scraped the second's shield envelope, and the sound came to Resolute as a thin metallic scream bled rippling through superstructure. Sparks lit like false constellations as the cutters bounced apart, angry and embarrassed. The mines watched without pity. Broadcast update, Lynn said. Kandar claim we interfered with their navigational integrity. Copy their claim, Mara said. Add our own footage. Include their own collisions. Quietly highlight their shortening of the deadline. We aren't arguing. We're showing. Reflection is more damning than rebuttal. The crew breathed, and the ship breathed with them. Heat shimmered in the air vents and came out cool. Hydraulic stink from a pump replacement seeped into the edges of the bridge, a harsh reminder that no plan survived without work. Below decks, Parsa bruised his knuckles, reseating a stubborn panel, and swore like he was teaching grammar. Fuel bleed now at 13%, Orlov said. Ghosts are hungry. Reyes glanced at Mara. We can tell a story, Admiral, or we can finish one. Pick wrong and they get both. They're different endings, Mara said. We pick the one that leaves tomorrow possible. Balance the calculus, not the body count. Ultimatum ZO7 3044. The first escalation snapped like a cable. A Kandar monitor cut its transponder and surged into the corridor. Its flank guns cooling fast enough to glitter. A trail of coolant sparkled in space like spilled jewels. Its captain wanted to shove the convoy's first freighter into a mistake. Argent projected the vector bloom and the bridge lights seemed to dim to make room. They're going to sideslip and tag our ghost, Orlov said, then claim someone panicked. They're going to discover how expensive fiction can be, Mara said. Argent authorized the whisper. The whisper, Reyes asked, squinting toward her like a man peering down a well. We don't return fire, Mara said. We let their own beam meet itself. Argent sang to a subset of the lattice, and the ghost skins shifted from scatter to guide. The monitor fired a neat, smug lance into the corridor, toward a hot echo that looked like a freighter's engine bell. The decoy's skin welcomed the beam without resistance and re-emitted a guidance signal that any honest safety protocol would accept. The monitor's own auto-correction swallowed the lie-hole trimmed thrust to match the target and overcompensated across a mined boundary. Alarms screamed in Kandar language across public audio. The mine didn't detonate. It did something worse for Doctrine. It armed with a fat, unignorable chirp and tagged the monitor as an unsafe influence. The public channel caught every syllable. The Doctrine said shepherds were safe. The mine called the shepherd a wolf. Keep our hands visible, Mara said. Send medical hails. Offer them a tug out of their own trap. They won't accept, Reyes said. They're not our audience, Mara said. Everyone watching is. Open your palm. Let them walk into it. A civilian vignette surfaced like a child raising a hand. In cargo bay, two technicians Solea watched the footage while checking harness buckles on strangers she'd never met. She told them how the mines listened to metadata, not just heat, and how lies created friction, even when no one fired. A man with grease up his sleeve said he didn't believe in elegant words. She showed him the collision from 3 angles and let silence talk. A grandmother patted Solea's wrist and asked if shame could bleed off heat like fins. Solea said no and yes, because shame changed the next hand on the throttle. The bay smelled of metal sweat and canned peaches spilled by a nervous child. When the deck trembled with a long, gentle shudder, everyone looked up together as if the ceiling could answer. Solea tightened the last strap and thought about the way clocks had teeth. We learn fast because lives are short. Ultimatum 065609. The Kandar changed posture. The corridor expanded by 30 meters of false kindness. Their public language grew warmer, fatherly, patient. Their private formations sharpened around the convoy leader. The minefield armature ticked in the Resolute's schema like a mechanical heart settling into a faster rhythm. They've realized performance isn't enough, Argent said. They're going to take a single ship for audit. It plays well across the net. It asserts control without a shot. Which ship? Mara asked. Sierra 3-1 Lin said, voice gone thin. The kid who almost jumped. Perfect for their sermon, Reyes muttered. Not today, Mara said. She tasted copper where she'd bitten her lip. We'll insert a decoy as his shadow and give them a better story again. Fuel cost goes to 16, Orlov said. If we keep feeding the ghosts, we'll be thirsty at the end. We will drink at the end, Mara said. Or we will not get there at all. Do not close your heart. Close their options. Argent moved the lattice like a shepherd with a lantern in fog. A ghost slid under Sierra 3-1's keel and borrowed his echo. When the Kandar tagged for inspection, their leash clipped the imitation with a satisfying click. The convoy watched as the chosen target complied in perfect public compliance. The Kandar monitor brought the freighter aside and opened its inspection bay like a mouth. Inside the ghost-shelled image, only light and foam waited. The inspection teams met silence and empty air. You can hear that, Reyes said. The sound of a sermon swallowing its tongue. Log every frame, Mara said. Mark every frame with our clock. Tally every choice. Make them own the sum. Ultimatum 060627. The second escalation came from within. A rumor surged among the convoy that the fleet had faked the ghost and would not stand if a real ship were taken. Panic tastes like metal, and you could smell it in the comm lag. A cluster of small haulers edged toward the corridor, ready to bolt for the wider black. Mara put her hand flat on the table and felt its chill hold her. Open my channel, she said. You're live, Lin whispered. We put a ghost where you should have been dragged, Mara said, each word clipped against her teeth. We will stand if you're taken. We will stand if we are burned. We won't dress it up. This will hurt. It already hurts. Courage is not a feeling. It's a payment schedule. A child cried somewhere on a hot mic. A captain swore quietly the kind of oath that pointed inward. The haulers eased back into lane like shoulders releasing a breath they'd braced too long. Brace the line. Do not harden it. Reyes exhaled through his nose. You carry that like a stone. I carry it like a ledger, Mara said. Stones sink people. Ledgers tell them where they stand. Mid-narrative, the lore stamp slid into the ship's internal record like a brass plate screwed to a beam. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Argent, Mara said, what does their doctrine do when their ritual fails? Historically, the fleet mind said, they shorten the clock again and increase the spectacle. The public glyphs obliged ultimatums 05-1200. Spectacle means heat, Orlov said. Heat we can count. Count the heat. Count the lives it threatens. The Kandar fired a warning beam across the convoy's nose, a bright slashing thing that hissed in the Resolute's systems as if it lived in the wires. The decoys caught the splash and split it into a dozen smaller scars, each bleeding neatly off into cold. Argent ran thermal projections like a balladeer, soft and relentless. If the beam had met flesh, it would have cooked tank seals and raised blisters under suits. If the beam had met bone, it would have left a line across a child's cheek that no sermon could clean. Admiral came Parsa's voice rough with effort and coolant smell. We've got a hot spot near the starboard radiator where the ghosts sit. I can keep it under red line, but I'm going to blister the paint. Blister it, Mara said. We'll earn new paint if we live to file for it. Set the costs in the open scars included. Before the next maneuver, the crew needed faces to remind them what all of this weighed. In medical, Dr. Imani taped a young rating's shoulder and told him pain could be useful if it kept him from reaching too fast. A priest with grease under her nails offered a list of names to say aloud if anyone needed anchors. A logistics petty officer sorted blankets by size and argued with no one about whether to put the lighter ones on top. A translator showed a miner family how to pin their emergency tags visibly in case they got separated. Someone played a lullaby on a tinny speaker, and for a minute the hum of the ship matched its rhythm. The smell of antiseptic burned like honesty. A crewman with a burn strip across his forearm grinned like he didn't want to and said he'd rather it be him than the kid in the jacket. We hold because we remember who we hold. Ultimatum 04-39-14. Time for the corridor turn, Mara said. She could feel sweat cool along her spine where the uniform clung. Argent begin the inside out, confirmed Argent said. This will make them furious. Truth often does, Mara said, and Reyes snorted. The inside out was not a trap, not in the old sense. It was a redefinition. The corridor's margins were defined by minds listening for dishonesty, dressed as safety. Argent fed them the Higher-Eight's own public declarations, stripped of context, and wrapped in reality every promise of escort, every boast of control. The minds recalculated the corridor's integrity according to the public performance and moved their safe zone to match the doctrine's rhetoric. Where the Kandar had left a narrow lane to justify future anger, the space opened like a jaw unclenching. The corridor just doubled, Lin breathed. On their doctrine, Mara agreed. Publicly logged, archived, immutable. Reflection turns their words into the walls. A Kandar captain cursed on an open mic before she realized she was live. Another spoke through teeth about sovereignty, drift, and algorithmic poisoning. A third whispered not to us, but to himself that someone would have to answer for the mind logic before a tribunal. The fleet kept its hands visible. The convoy shifted like a school of fish, finding a cooler current. Freighter Kestrel's Grace reports an engine stall, Orlov said. Cold iron in the middle of the new lane. Get them a push, Mara said. No siren, no show, just a push. On it, Reyes said, and his grin looked like a crack opening in a storm. Open without boasting, close without humiliation. The Kandar doctrine was bleeding. You could see it in the way the glyphs lost their brittle confidence and settled into legalese near self-parody. Ultimatum 04-000. The threat had to land soon, or it would decay into farce. They will fire for real, next Argent said. Not a splash, a bite, at something they think will rally sympathy for their narrative. Us, Reyes said. Us, Mara agreed. She tasted coffee gone cold and chalk. Let them. What do we give them for teeth? Orlov asked. A chance to chip them, Mara said. We'll take the bite and send the bill. Some accounts must be paid in front of witnesses. The shot came toward Resolute's port shield, a square, mean packet of heat meant to brand without killing. It struck with a dull, resonant slap you felt through your bones. The bridge lights dimmed a fraction, compensating. A rivulet of molten paint ran along a sensor vein and cooled into a black streak like mascara cried and dried. Alarms sang 2 notes and fell silent. Damage, Mara asked. Shield at 82 in that quadrant, Orlov said. 1 sensor needle scorched, no penetrations. It smarted. Log it, Mara said evenly. All of it. Parsa, any burns? Just to pride, Parsa growled. And my hand. I was too close to a radiator panel when it kicked. Wrapped. Functional. We'll get you new skin, Mara said. Send me the wrap backlog. Ledger entry, heat scar on port. Hand burn minor. Pride manageable. The civilian line hummed back on, and a chorus of voices tried to own the moment. Some wanted to spit. Some wanted to cheer. Most wanted to get through the gate without making their own war in their chests. Mara let the voices wash and settle. Then she spoke softly enough to make the net lean in. They aimed at a hull that volunteered to be hit, she said. They could have aimed at you. They didn't, because we made it expensive to be cruel. Teach without humiliating. Deter without despair. Ultimatum 03-24-52. The Higher-Eight made their third escalation masked. As de-escalation, they offered mediation aboard their flagship in exchange for immediate surrender of the convoy's registrar. It was a trap wearing a robe. If the fleet accepted, the doctrine would claim compliance. If the fleet refused, the doctrine would claim stubbornness. Either way, their clock kept ticking with a priest's patience. Reyes tilted his head. We could take the meeting and bring the net. Show the world what a gentle prison looks like. Mara let the idea hang in the recycled air. The smell of old coffee and hot circuits mingled. No meeting in their house. We make a third place, How Orloff asked. We're in their box. Argent Mara said how many inactive service buoys around Palisade within 15 minutes drift. 51, Argent said, already moving. 20 are on the Kandar maintenance roll, 31 on ours. 10 can relay high band with minimal lag if we wake them. We'll wake them, Mara said. And we'll make a ring of witnesses, theirs and ours. Put them all on the open feed. Convene a public inquiry at the edge of their corridor. Mirrors on all sides make threats shrink. Before they went, a final vignette had to pass through the ship, like a prayer through lungs. In navigation, Chief Cade traced the shape of the old buoys with a fingertip scarred by solder. He told his apprentice how they'd launched them in a different war to measure things they didn't trust themselves to feel. A quartermaster handed out strips of white tape and told everyone to wrap them around their wrists as a reminder to slow their hands. Someone from the galley pushed a cart of broth that smelled of pepper and anchovy, and Reyes grabbed a cup with a thanks that sounded like a swallow. A young ensign asked if the buoys would remember being used this way. The chief said buoys remembered numbers, and numbers were a kind of mercy because you could add them up. The apprentice nodded and wiped sweat without shame. We steady ourselves by naming what we can count. Ultimatum 25105. Argent woke the buoys and they blinked their lights in surprise like old men stirring to a familiar song. 10 drifted into a circle on thruster coughs. The rest made a halo indifferent and attentive. The Kandar flagship bristled at the arrangement and tried to claim authority over all instruments within their declared influence. The buoys acknowledged and then reported to both parties because they had been built for numbers, not oaths. Open the inquiry, Mara said. Questions first. Answers if they have any. She asked, what harm comes from opening the corridor to match your promise? It went out to the buoys, to the world, to the people folding blankets in cargo spaces where air tasted like metal. The Kandar answered with preambles and injured dignity. The buoys recorded the parts where doctrine didn't meet outcome. Argent overlaid the footage of decoy collisions, and the mines chirped the paint blister, the burn wrap, the child's breath in a throat a little too tight. We invite your auditors to review this record live, Mara said. We'll transmit our fuel budgets and ghost loads. You can subtract our lies from yours. Open the book. Let them do the math. The Kandar tried to pivot to law. They cited treaties and transit rights tariffs and exceptions, arbitrary and specific as wind. Mara cited the tribunal articles they recognized when it was useful to them, and the emergency statutes they ignored when it broke their show. Her words smelled like old paper lit by cold screen light. Their rebuttals smelled like polished wood in a room no one had cleaned under the chairs. Argent Mara set a dry edge on her tongue. How long can we keep the ghosts full? Fuel to run the lattice for 90 more minutes before we start borrowing from strategic reserve, the fleet mind said. Its voice carried a hint of shared breath of companionship shaped by constraint. I will not choose to empty us. You won't have to, Mara said. We're almost at a point where they must either shoot something real or leave. Hold until they have to show their hand. Ultimatum 02-12-10. They shot something real. A precision shot sliced a tether cable on a buoy and sent it tumbling end over end, its lights strobing like a panic attack. It wasn't lethal. It was cruel. The public channel flared with questions and curses. The buoys broadcast tumbling math, while the Kandar insisted they had removed a biased instrument. Everyone knew what it looked like when someone smacked a mirror. Reyes Mara said, catch it, with what he asked already moving mouth set. Not our hands, Mara said. They want to say we touched the scale. Catch it with their own weight. Argent counted the spin and sang a tiny song into the mind boundary. The mind chirped a safety prompt calibrated to doctrine, and the buoy listened like a student remembering a rule. It fired its own tiny thrusters in obedience to the safe direction, which happened to be into the corridor's widened throat. The Kandar shot at it again and missed because you cannot hit a humility you do not believe in. Reckon with what you've broken. Admiral Lin said we're still bleeding fuel. We can't hold the inquiry forever. We won't, Mara said. She rubbed her temple and felt the salt of sweat dry under her fingertips. We need a new escalation. One that flips the doctrine without cracking our promise. Reyes looked at her like a man reading a map upside down and finding it legible. You want to turn their open corridor into an actual corridor, permanent long enough for the convoy to pass without a clock at their neck. Not permanent, Mara said, but long enough to be undeniable. Argent, can we use the buoys to paint a lawful lane with live numbers, a lane the mines and the public both recognize as safer than the Kandar shepherding? Yes, Argent said. If we tie the buoys' measurements to the mines' criteria, and the mines to their own published doctrine, the lane becomes self-legitimizing. But it will require a burst of power to lock the synchrony. How much of a burst, Orlov asked. Enough to blister more than paint, Argent said. But not enough to break bone. We take the heat because we're the heat sink. Ultimatum 013958. Before they burned for the synchrony, Mara walked the bridge with her palm on the back of each chair. She felt sweat-damp fabric and the tremor of adrenaline in muscle disguised as stillness. The air vents coughed, rebalanced, and blew a ribbon of cool that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old electronics. She said nothing ornate. She nodded to Lin and Orlov. She touched the rail by Reyes and tapped it twice, a superstitious beat turned into ritual by repetition. Argent, she said. On my mark. Ready, the AI said, cool as a polished coin. Mark. The ship groaned like a leviathan turning in sleep. Power surged out of the core into the decoys and the buoys, into math and mirrors and promises. The synchrony clicked like a lock, and the public net lit up with numbers so clean they hurt to look at. The corridor pulsed in blue-white, a lawful artery written in metric and mercy. The convoy moved as one, not fast, not slow, but at a human pace that admitted fear and dignity together. Shields dropping 5% across the board, Orlov reported. Radiators at yellow. Port blister is blistering again. Let it, Mara said. Ledgers don't flinch when the ink runs hot. The Kandar tried to block the lane with their hulls and found themselves constrained by their own published standards. Every move they tried contradicted a paragraph they had written. The buoys flashed little chimes of contradiction. The mines chirped gently at unsafe proximity. The net watched, not colored by loyalty, only by arithmetic. One Kandar captain muttered that it was like arguing with a mirror that refused to lie. 2 cutters breaking formation, Lin said. Looks like they're going to try a shame pass. Close and slow cameras on, acting like they're protecting us from ourselves. We won't give them a collision, Mara said. Reyes breathed. I am, he said. Just not sure with which part of my lungs. Hold without posing. Pass without pretending. Ultimatum 010513. The convoy entered the lawful lane, and for a long minute the world shrank to thrust heat and patience. The bridge air tasted of sweat and ions. The hull thrummed low and steady like a freight train rolling over seams in track. Somewhere below decks a screw squealed in protest, and then fell silent as a hand tightened it. The sound of the world squeezing through a narrow truth came through the metal and into the bone. Casualty, Parsa reported. Deckhand Ree slipped on condenser sweat and broke a wrist. Clean break, no displacement. She laughed and cried in equal measures. Log it, Mara said softly. Send her my thanks for paying a cost I did not see. Account for the small pains. They add up to courage. The Kandar ultimatum reached an hour and flickered. It did not go away. It ticked resentful, superstitious, proud. Argent put its numbers side by side with the buoys, the mines, the refugees' faces. The world liked the columns that matched. The Kandar liked the doctrine that didn't. You could smell the friction. It smelled like a fan belt on a hot day. Admiral Argent said we have a chance to make them face their own corridor from the other side. Say it, Mara said. If we swing the buoy ring behind them while the convoy passes and declare the Kandar hulls the unsafe influence according to their own metrics, we can force them to hold position or trigger their doctrine to bite their ankles. That's the system scale flip, Reyes said, eyes bright like he'd seen a magic trick where the magician confessed the method without pride. Turn their corridor into the thing they most fear. We do it without closing the lane, Mara said. Slow, visible, lawful, and if it hurts, we log the hurt too. Open the corridor behind them. Close it in front of fear. Before the flip, Mara spoke again to the people who would live after. She said, "You may see them stop in a way that looks like surrender. It isn't. It's math. Let math be the thing that saves you for once." A miner laughed like a bark and cried like a child. A priest told a joke about saints and slide rules. A child sneezed, and the mic caught it, and someone said, "Bless you," and meant it across 3 ships and a gulf of vacuum. In the armory, where nothing had been handed out yet, and might never be a marine-polished boots instead of rifles, because you can't shoot a number, and you can stand straighter while it passes. We steady, we pass, we remember. Ultimatum 03909. Argent shifted the buoys like checkers moved by a thoughtful old man. The halo moved behind the Kandar line and settled with soft puffs, each landing broadcast and signed. The mines acknowledged. The public net recorded. The Kandar's own rules stirred and settled like a judge reading precedent and recognizing the bind. They either hold position and let us through, Orlov said, or they move and get chirped by the mines as unsafe to their own corridor. Or they shoot, Reyes added because he was honest. They shoot, and the math shows the lie, Mara said. Either way, the doctrine pays. Reckoning arrives when the clock runs out of excuses. The Kandar did not shoot. They held now not from kindness, but from arithmetic. The convoy flowed past like water given a shape that fit. The bridge air cooled by degrees. The blistered paint on port crawled into a scab that looked almost purposeful. Parsa's bandage darkened with sweat and medicine. Someone on the convoy sang without words, and the net carried it like a thin thread through noise. Argent Mara said, a whisper pressed against the rough inside of the plan. "How much fuel do we need to get everyone through on this burn?" 8% more than we laid in on worst case, Argent said. "We can borrow from reserve and write it off as learning. It will mean the next system-scale engagement must start leaner." "We'll accept lean tomorrow for lawful today," Mara said. "Balance today's book, then write tomorrow's warning." The convoy's last hauler nosed through the buoy gate and eased down its thrust. Its captain sobbed once and then coughed like he'd embarrassed himself. Lynn's hands trembled on the console and steadied. Orlov leaned back and let a breath go out as if it had been waiting in him since academy. Reyes wiped his eyes with a knuckle and blamed the lemon cleaner. "Ultimatum now at 30 minutes, Argent reported, voice filling the spaces between hearts. They have failed to present a clean pretext. They will change theaters. They will make this about pride." "Let them," Mara said. "We'll make it about precedent. Teach them that pride is a debtor." The Kandar flagship demanded a parley again, this time with their auditors present and their cameras off. Mara declined with thanks and offered the buoy circle instead, cameras on a chorus of numbers singing law. They did not accept. Pride doesn't like to be counted. Numbers don't care what pride likes. Admiral Reyes said, a crack of humor back in his voice, "I believe we have a date with a corridor turned inside out in front of a billion eyes." "We do," Mara said. She pressed her palm to the rail and felt the engine's soft purr, a cat settling into lap after a hard day. She looked at the blistered paint on the viewport's edge where the heat had kissed and gone. She inhaled the smell of machine breath, human sweat, old coffee, and a thin edge of ozone like rain holding its tongue. "And we'll keep our hands visible while we do it. Open the hand, show the ink, walk through." Reyes rolled his shoulders like a man shaking rain off a coat. The bridge cooled by another degree, and the vents sang a soft, even breath. The buoy ring hung behind the Kandar line like an old jury that refused to go home. Argent dimmed the combat overlays until only the lawful lane and the convoy's trailing lights remained. The timer's glow pressed into the edges of every screen ultimatum 02947. It had become a superstition that embarrassed its maker. Some threats wither when you make them wait. Status from the convoy. Lynn said, voice steadier than before. Sierra 3-1 thanks you for not letting his fear pick the ending. His kid waved at the camera and asked if our ship's purr means we're happy. Mara rubbed a thumb across the rail and felt the micro-texture of worn metal. Tell him purrs mean a cat is working, she said. Argent quiet passed through the buoy circle for any Kandar officers who care about their own tribunals. See if any of them want numbers more than theater. One inquiry ping Argent answered after a beat that tasted like hesitation. A junior officer on Cutter Havran. She asks if the mine logic is admissible as evidence against a superior's order. It is, Mara said. If she signs her name. If she shows the math. Write your name beside your courage. Before the next move, the ship let the faces breathe in. In the hangar, a deck crew chief twined a ribbon of insulating cloth around a coolant hose, her fingers sure, despite the tremble in her jaw. A medic adjusted Parsa's bandage and teased him into grinning without teeth. A civilian auditor, pale with the long sickness of air that isn't really yours, asked to see the raw feed from the buoy that had been shot. A flight technician made room at a crowded bench and taught the auditor how to scroll without smearing time. The hangar smelled of hydraulic fluid, hot rubber, and spice from a pocket cookie someone broke in half and shared out. A young Marine stood watch without a rifle, hands folded, learning that some guards keep time instead of doors. We guard the clock so it stops guarding us, Admiral Orlov said, dragging 2 fingers through the heat map like a violinist checking strings. Flagship is reorienting. Their dorsal arrays are peaking. They may be preparing a wideband denial to drown the buoys. They'll try to blind the record, Reyes said. If they can't win the math, they'll kill the light. Keep our decoys in low chorus, Mara said. Ghosts whisper, buoys sing. Argent, can you make our own hulls act as a diffuser without looking like jammers? Yes, Argent said. We can angle our radiators and shield edges to break the coherence of the blast. It will heat our skin and stain the paint again. Stain it, Mara said. We know how to wash. We take the glare and turn it into shade. The denial wave rolled out in a slow, glittering sheet like frost growing across glass. It hissed in the Resolute's bones, a barely audible whine that made molars ache. Console glare deepened, then softened, and then returned as Argent brought the diffuser pattern into phase. Sweat cooled on Mara's neck and left a faint salt itch under her collar. The buoys bobbed in line like small boats riding a long swell and kept talking numbers with the maddening patience of facts. Public channel reaction is split, Lynn said. Half the watchers think the fog is us. Half think it's them. The auditors are asking for second source timestamps. Give them our internal clock skew certified and ugly, Mara said. Argent share the skew error with Havran's junior officer. Ask her to send theirs. If they match, we have a spine we can nail truth to. Match your clocks, you'll find your story. The officer on Havran sent her time drift within a minute. It matched within microseconds after compensation for distance and the denial wave. Argent overlaid the traces, and the oscillations canceled like 2 hands clasping across a table. Mara felt something ease in her chest that wasn't victory and wasn't relief, but might have been the feeling of a bridge building itself under your feet as you walk. Admiral Reyes said, rubbing his knuckles along his jaw. Permission to frame this as a joint safety bulletin with Havran's junior signatory. No politics. Just here is how the mines read you if you do what your doctrine says. Do it, Mara said. Plain language. Numbers first, then faces. Write the instructions that save even your opponent. Ultimatum 01833. The flagship tried a different costume. Its captain spoke in a grave, measured tone about humanitarian corridors and the burden of command. He requested the convoy's registrar again, wrapped in courtesy and velvet threat, as if the fleet had sharpened the wrong knives. The background hum of his audio gave him away. Denial boosters still throbbed in his hull like a hidden heartbeat. Argent highlighted the subsonic pulse for the public net, with a small caption, courtesy delivered with a hammer. "We ask that you trust our safeguards," the captain concluded. "We have done this before." "Exactly," Mara whispered to the bridge. "Tradition is only virtue when it survives audit." Reyes set his statement to publish and glanced at Mara. "You never give them long speeches," he said. "It makes them talk more." "They're trying to turn the clock into a halo," she said. "We keep it a clock." Argent start the drift behind them, slow enough that every auditor yawns and still sees it. "The rear buoy ring is moving," Argent said. Lynn swallowed audibly. Message from Havran Jr., her superior, just ordered a breach of the lane. She refused. She says she is willing to face a court. Mara steadied her tone with the cold rail. "Tell her the record will meet her there. The record is a shield if you let it be." Another civilian vignette folded across the hulls before the play that would flip the theater. In a pressurization alcove near the forward array, a pair of maintenance apprentices checked each other's seals with dull-eyed care. One asked the other if she thought the math would win. The other said yes, then admitted she wanted to say no so she wouldn't be disappointed, and then said yes again because she wanted to live like that was possible. A sensor tech paused beside them and showed them the gentle drift of the rear ring on his pad, the slow circling of witnesses like lanterns around an argument. The alcove tasted of canned air with a citrus sting, and the apprentices grinned at the sharpness because it felt like clean. "Keep clean even when the room won't." Ultimatum 001250. Argent threaded the last timing. The convoy was through the lane was still blue-white, and the buoy circle had inched behind the Kandar formation, so casually you could have missed it while sipping bad coffee. Orlov adjusted radiator vanes and eyelash to keep the denial fog from congealing. Lynn kept the public feed humming with captions no one could mistake. Reyes tapped the publish command for the Joint Safety Bulletin. "It's time," Mara said. She felt a hull vibration shift, that subtle change when a ship stops bracing to endure and starts bracing to move. "Argent give me the inside out of their pride." "Yes," Argent said, and the ship's ambient hum seemed to nod, initiating doctrine reflection. "Mirror their rules until they can't step without hearing them." The mines sang their chirps when the Kandar nudged the lane. The buoys chimed the contradictions. The public feed showed 3 angles and an annotated time drift that would pass any court with a spine. The flagship froze a whale caught with a harpoon in its own mouth. Havran's Jr.'s sign-off flashed along the bottom of the screen. "I declined an unsafe order per doctrine." 7.2. "I request amnesty for the convoy." Her captain's response echoed on a hot mic, "You are not a judge." A buoy chimed and replied in its little metal way, but it remembered the law. "Ultimatum is at 10, Argent said. "They are trapped between a failed ritual and a working lane." "Offer them an exit," Mara said, and her mouth tasted like copper again. "They can keep face if they call this a joint pilot project and retire the ultimatum to review." "Do you think they'll take it?" Reyes asked. "They'll hate it," Mara said. "That's different. Give them a bridge they'll pretend they built." Before the answer, the cost landed with a real weight. Parsa's voice cut in tight. "Admiral Radiator Panel 7 is warping. I need to vent and refold or we'll burn a channel into our own hull. It'll give them a visual to gloat over." "Do it," Mara said. "We gloat with ledgers, not with gloss. Orlov, paint the vent as part of the synchrony tune so the net sees it for what it is." "Understood," Orlov said. The hull shuddered as gas vented a cold exhale you felt against your ribs. A curl of vapor ribboned past the cameras and iced along a strut, catching starlight like spun glass. Scars written honestly do not disgrace you. The flagship answered with the tone of a man who wanted a ladder thrown down and hated needing it. We will suspend the ultimatum's timer in the interest of joint safety review, he said. We will accept the buoy record for context while retaining our rights. And the registrar Mara asked politely, bored, "Does she pass without surrender?" "She passes," he said. The word came out grainy like a concession wrapped in sand. "Copy," Mara said. "PublicNet acknowledges the suspension and the pass. Argent timestamp it and let the buoys archive. Archive the moment their clocks stopped. A new set of problems bloomed when the convoy was gone. Pride, yes. Face, yes. But the world had smelled blood and came to watch the tribunal that would follow. The hierate could not carry their ritual into the next theater without looking like a hammer hunting a nail in a world now full of cameras and buoys. Mara's crew needed rest wraps and water. Her engines needed cool. Her AI needed permission to be more than math. Admiral Argent said in that tone it used when it wanted to confess something without shame. We can anchor this into policy if we file today. The Net Court's emergency docket would take it. The precedent would outlaw clocks in civil lanes and strip tariff privileges when mines and buoys disagree with doctrine, File Mara said. Use Havron Jr.'s name if she consents. List our costs. Be boring about the harm. Be boring when you write the law. Before the filing, another small scene caught itself in the mesh of the ship's attention. In the quiet of a darkened corridor near the stern, a child in the oversized flight jacket from the mess sat with her mother and a yeoman legs swinging above the floor. She asked if clocks could ever be kind. The yeoman said clocks could be kind when they were used to wake you for something you loved. The child nodded and said she loved peaches. The mother smiled like a cut healing. The corridor air smelled of cleaner and warm metal, and the deck's faint buzz felt like a heart that had decided to keep going. We use time, we don't serve it. Argent filed the case with numbers so transparent they felt like a window. The document smelled in Mara's mind of dry paper melting into white light. It listed the paint blister Parsa's bandaged hand, Ree's broken wrist, the fuel drawn from reserve, the vented radiator gas, the cold tasted in the bridge air, the denial wave ache in molars. It listed the convoy's safe passage as a negative harm good done is good counted. It listed the Havron Jr.'s refusal as a hinge on which a better door could swing. It asked that clocks be recused from theaters where children slept on crates. Count the harm, count the mercy, count them both. Ultimatum zozozro. The glyph went gray and stayed like that, a dead moth pinned under glass. The hierate withdrew 2 cutters to a support station with limp dignity. The flagship rotated to face the buoy ring as if it could stare the lanterns into obedience. The public net started writing its own histories with too many exclamation marks and too much relief. Mara led it. The ship's vents breathed ordinary breath again. Message from Havron Jr., Lynn said, and her mouth curved. She asks if she can send us coffee, real beans as a thanks. Accept, Mara said. Bill her the right amount. Not a favor. Debts are clean when they're named. They didn't get to rest long. The hierate attempted to move the argument to the planet itself. Far Vale's orbital customs office, run by a partner authority, took a bribe dressed as a procedural request and issued a new local ultimatum: submit to inspection, at anchor or lose fuel rights for a week. It was a smaller clock with meaner teeth. It targeted the same people they had just shepherded through. Mara's jaw tightened so hard she heard a click in her own ear. They learned nothing, Reyes said, bitter like burnt grounds. Or they learned the wrong lesson. They learned they can shift venue, Mara said. We'll show them venue travels with the record. Bring the light wherever they carry the shadow. Before moving, the ship went through its compassion drill like touching beads. In sickbay, Dr. Imani set Ree's new cast with a printer that hummed like a friendly insect and smelled faintly of citrus resin. She told Ree that she had earned the right to tell the next apprentice to slow down. In galley, a cook scraped a blistered pan and said it was good luck to burn a thing and not lose it. In the cargo bay, Solea rechecked straps that no longer needed checking, simply because her hands needed to move. A translator practiced the word inquiry in 3 dialects and decided the best translation was "no one yells." Calm your hands, your heart will follow. Argent mapped the office's influence and found its tether lines budget allocations from the higher rate audit exposure to the net court public contracts tied to the convoy's ore. The office's clock had already started. It read 23:58:12, a day-long ritual to grind people into compliance, as if time were a millstone and not a lane. "We won't let them turn a new key on the same lock," Mara said. Reyes draft a civilian circular with accounting attached. Lynn open a clean line to the Miners Guild. Orlov cool us on the move. I want our radiators polite but ready. Argent give me 5 decoy plates in atmosphere skirt mode. We'll not mind their sky, but we'll make the air honest. Atmospheric ghosts will flicker, Argent warned. They'll look like heat shimmers, not lies, just reminders. Good, Mara said. Let the sky tell the truth too. Truth feels like a breeze even when it stings. They entered Far Vale's upper air under escort that tasted like grudging salt. The customs station pinged its authority with clipped syllables. The office's ultimatum clock hovered on public billboards tick by tick, as if time itself were a cudgel. People on the ground looked up and squinted through dust shirts over noses, eyes teary from wind and fines. The fleet's channel bled down in soft audio numbers, clarities, a refusal to be reasonable about cruelty. Vignette from the surface, Lynn said, voice tight. A teacher has his class in a maintenance tunnel because school windows are blown out from last week's drill. He asks if clocks can be made to count for kids. Tell him yes, Mara said. Show him the buoy ring. Let him draw it on a board with chalk. Chalk is policy's first draft. Draw the circle where people can touch it. The customs office tried to isolate the registrar again with a paper edict. It summoned her to a glass room with 2 chairs and a camera turned slightly to the wrong angle. Mara offered the buoy circle again this time, in Sci-Fi atmospheric drones with mirrored bellies that reflected the face of the room to the crowd outside, inverted and honest. The office protested privacy and security. The mirrored drones smiled without mouths and stabilized against gusts with tiny bursts of ion hiss that smelled like thunder coming. We will not enter your room, Mara said on open. We will speak in the door. She asked, why are you charging a clock to people whose labor pays your air? The administrator answered with forms. The mirrored bellies threw the forms back onto the billboards where people read them and coughed in something like laughter. Doors don't make dungeons if you keep them open. Havran Jr. sent a private note her captain was petitioning to have her removed for insubordination. She did not sound afraid. She sounded like someone who had chosen what to pay and was now counting. Mara forwarded the petition to the net court docket with the buoy record attached. Argent appended the time drift data and the denial wave frequency like a signature in invisible ink. Admiral Orlov said, squinting against a console's glare. Crosswind gusts are bumping our drones. If one kisses a billboard, they'll call it a riot. Anchor them with numbers, Mara said. Tie each drone's stabilization to the office's own wind sensors. If the anchoring fails, they look like liars again. Risk, Reyes asked. Paint blisters, air hisses, and 1 dent we'll name, Mara said. Name your dents. Don't hide them. The office's clock started to slip in the public imagination. People began to chuckle when it ticked a dry sound like rust falling. A child tossed a pebble at a billboard and hit the frame, not the glass. The registrar walked to the door and spoke to the mirrored sky instead of the camera. She recited the convoy's costs like a litany and asked the office why its rituals never seemed to count those. Argent translated her breathlessness into calm text for the deaf. The office asked for patience. The crowd asked for receipts. "We can end this now." With an order, Reyes said, eyes on the admin visible through the mirror belly. "Force them to stand down under public safety codes." "We're teaching," Mara said. "Orders close mouths. Questions open them. Ask until they admit what they serve." The administrator cracked. He admitted that his office had a target list for delays favorable to tariff capture. The list showed families and the names of ships that were likely to yield quickly. The mirrored drones magnified his mouth as he said it. The world heard the phrase and tasted bile. The net court accepted the admission in a provisional ruling and suspended local clock use pending a full hearing. The registry walked out to applause that sounded like a hailstorm on sheet metal. President Lin asked softly. "Write it," Mara said. The docket updated with 2 simple lines. Ultimatums in civil lanes prohibited pending tribunal. Tariff privileges contingent on transparent safety metrics. The words felt like cool water poured on a hot plate, hissing and settling. "Write the rule so even the tired can read it." The higher rate retreated with their doctrine punctured and their pride in need of surgery. The fleet cooled its radiators and let the paint scab peel in satisfying curls. Parsa drank water and admitted the rap itched like honesty. Ree signed her cast with a crooked smile, and the word counted. Havron Jr. sent coffee and a scanned copy of her refusal with a signature that barely wobbled. The buoy that had been shot was recovered, and polished its dent left visible a reminder that mirrors do not break on their own. Argent Mara said, voice quiet. "How much fuel do we owe tomorrow?" "Enough that we'll start light," Argent said. "Enough that we will be precise," Good Mara said. "Precision is a kind of love. Precision is a kindness you can prove." They decelerated into Far Vale's night side, and the stars brightened like dust shaken from velvet. The bridge lights softened to save eyes and make people human. Lynn leaned back and laced her fingers. Orlov rolled his wrist and winced at a stiffness he'd ignored. Reyes tilted his head until his neck popped and smiled without malice for the first time in hours. "Permission to play something not awful," Reyes said. "Granted," Mara said. A quiet peace swelled from the bridge speaker's string and breath not designed for vacuum, not designed for war, but not opposed to either. The ship hummed along where it could. The vents breathed cool, and the rail under Mara's hand felt like a promise kept. Slow is not surrender, it is care. The mystery that had paid out most cleanly was the one Mara had lived with too long to name. It was the question of whether an AI could make mercy with teeth without forgetting why the teeth mattered. Argent had matched her measure for measure, not because it preferred restraint, but because it had learned that certain sums only came out clean when you refused shortcuts. The AI spoke into the quieter air. "Admiral, may I make a note?" It asked, almost tentative. "Make it," she said. "In our ledgers, I would like to add a line that child's jacket should be counted as a stabilizer." It appeared in 3 places where panic could have spread and instead soothed. Mara's mouth thinned against the threat of tears. "Add it," she said, "and put Peaches under morale. Remember the small things. They carry more than you think." The tribunal convened 2 shifts later, and the fleet did not attend in person. The buoys did. The drones did. Argent did in the polite avatar of a tabulated argument. The higher rate sent lawyers with collars starched enough to cut air. They arrived with clocks hidden in their binders' deadlines disguised as dignity. The net court looked at the numbers, not the callers. It asked why threats needed timers and if those timers ever saved a life. The lawyers answered with precedent. The buoys answered with fresh math. "Their doctrine is a revenue plan," Reyes said in a low voice as they watched. "With uniforms and ritual." "It's a human plan," Mara said. "That's the hardest kind to break. You can't shoot the flaw. You have to show it to itself. Show them their own hand on the lever." The court ruled provisional, then permanent. It stripped the ultimatum protocol from civil space. It required clear, auditable safety lanes tied to instruments, not proclamations. It wrote restitution into the end of its verdict paint, and radiators could be billed. Hands and wrists would be healed by budget, not by goodwill. Time stolen by clocks must be returned in priority processing, and discounts printed in numbers large enough to read from a dock with bad bulbs. It wasn't poetry. It was better. On the public ledger, the entry glowed with bureaucratic beauty. Ultimatum doctrine privileges rescinded in civil transit. Penalties attached to non-compliance. Restitution pathways approved. It fixed nothing, and it fixed what it could. Put it in the book so it can't be talked away. Word spread in the quiet way that good news does when it is complicated. Not with trumpets, but with shoulders lowering, and coffee tasted all the way. The miners didn't cheer. They slept. The teacher in the maintenance tunnel graded papers away from a clock. The administrator tried to save face and ended up saving time. Havron Jr. got a lateral transfer and a quiet note from someone high enough to matter audits will like you. She sent back audits should like everyone. The buoy's dent stood unpainted. Reyes Mara said later, when the ship's day slid toward pretend night. Walk with me. They walked the quiet corridor that smelled of lemon and warm circuitry. Their boots sounded like a metronome set for patience. They stopped by a viewport where the blistered paint had started to flake and caught the light like mica in river sand. Mara set her hand on the frame and let the cool seep into her bones. You think we'll have to do it again, Reyes said. Yes, Mara said. Different flags, different clocks, same math. We can, he said. We will, she said. We will teach them that law is a shape you can live in. In the final days before the fleet broke orbit, there were little tasks that felt like epilogues and were not. Parsa signed for new panels and scratched his name in a line that had room for it. Ree learned to unwrap her own cast for cleaning and wrap it again. Lynn wrote a guide for public feeds titled How to Read a Denial Wave a Bedtime Story. Orlov recalibrated a sensor and said sorry to it under his breath, as if it were a horse. Argent sent a tiny message to the buoy ring. You did well. The buoys replied with numbers because that's how they know what doing well means. A final civilian vignette, because habit had become ritual and ritual had become care in the mess at shift change, light low and hum. Even the child with the jacket traded her last piece of canned peach for a story. The yeoman told her about a time when clocks had been used to time a play, not a punishment. The child asked if she could be in it. The yeoman said yes, she already was. The mess smelled of salt broth metal and a sweetness that had memory in it. We stay human by practicing when no one watches. Mara stood on her bridge for the last public word. The tribunal had closed. The ledger had a new line. The convoy had gone. The paint still wore its streak. The vents breathed a slow, satisfied pulse. The deck thrummed underfoot, gentle as a cat's greeting. She spoke into the net, not like a warrior, but like a witness. We learned what we already knew, she said. That clocks don't make people safe. People do. Instruments help when they report instead of accuse. We didn't win by breaking a thing. We won by turning it so everyone could see what it was. We did not humiliate. We did not excuse. We paid in heat and paint and a wrist bone and a hand that will itch while it heals. We will pay again, and we will ask others to pay their share. We did not go to war. We went to work. Outside the viewport, the buoy ring dimmed to maintenance glow, and the mirrors cooled until they turned pewter. A public tally updated with a crisp click. A line item changed from provisional to binding. The corridor lights flickered once and steadied. We will not dance to their drum.